This video is probably going to get demonetized, but today I want to talk about The Wild by Webster. This is a dark taboo romance that was banned on Amazon, both for its content and the way that the content was handled. This was then used by the author as marketing, so read into that what you will. I want to do a full plot breakdown because I feel like a lot of people are curious about this book and don't want to support the author or don't want to read it themselves. But before I do, we need to do a quick content warning. Now, the author did put some semblance of a content warning in the beginning of the book. I'll make sure that I put that on the screen for you now. To me, this feels more like marketing, trying to titillate the audience by waving something taboo at them to see if they'll bite. And it doesn't do what it's supposed to, what a content warning is supposed to, which is warn the audience about potential things that could cause them mental or emotional harm. So I've come up with my own list of things that I found in this book that stuck out to me. I'll go ahead and put that on the screen for you now. So if any of these topics are going to disturb you or bother you, I highly recommend that you skip this review. Like I said, this book was pretty dark and very taboo, and I had a pretty visceral reaction to it, so I have a lot to say. Now, this is a work of fiction. The characters are not real, and the things that they do and say are not real. I am not going to sit here and bash the author or ascribe to them motivations that they may or may not have had. The only one who knows why they chose to handle these topics in this way is the author themselves, and I can't speak for them. I'm also not here to bash people who love this book. If you like it, that's okay. I don't have to like the same things that you do, and I'm not judging you if you like it. Read what you want to read, like what you want to like. I don't get a say in that. All of that being said, this review isn't for you. It's not for people who love the book, and it's not for the author. It's for other readers to determine if they want to read the book, and for people who have read it to have a place to discuss their thoughts and feelings on it. This book is a taboo romance, which means it's supposed to make you uncomfortable, and it does so pretty effectively. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's something it's not, or judge it for being what it says on the tin. But I'm also not going to downplay the fact that it is dealing with really taboo topics and makes a lot of people really uncomfortable, and they need a place to talk about those things and the way that it makes them feel, including myself. Okay, so let's go over the plot. I'm going to tell you what happened in the book in the way and order that it was presented, page by page, and then I'm going to interject with my own thoughts and feelings. This review will have all the spoilers, so if that's something that bothers you, you can skip over the plot summary and plot breakdown by using the timestamps down below. I'm also going to be making jokes and being sarcastic during this review, and I just want it to be 100% clear, I am not making fun of real people who things like this have happened to. I'm not making light of the situation or the gravity of the topics that we're addressing. Gallows humor is a way of dealing with uncomfortable topics, and I am no exception. So the book opens 6 years in the past with a family that has recently lost their 10-year-old son. You have Reed, who is a multimillionaire real estate mogul, his wife Sabrina, who has sunk into a severe, crippling clinical depression. She basically has confined herself to bed. She doesn't really get up, she doesn't really engage in life or interact with her family in any way. And then you have Devin, who is the deceased son's twin sister, and she is also 10. And this is basically just to introduce us to the characters, to help us understand that Mommy is absentee. She has fallen into herself and refuses to get up out of bed. And basically what we're left with is Devin, the little girl, and Reed, her father. Fast forward 6 years, and Sabrina is still suffering from crippling depression and still can't or won't get out of bed. Reed is grossly overcompensating for the loss of his son and his lack of affection from his wife by showering affection and attention on his daughter, Devin. And Devin is desperate for all of that love and affection and attention because not only has she lost her twin, but her mother basically can't be bothered. So the family is basically falling apart, and Reed has decided that the way he's going to fix his family is by selling all of his real estate and buying a massive parcel of land out in the Alaskan wilderness. They are road tripping up to Alaska in a camper or an RV, and this is basically supposed to like shake their lives up and pull them out of their sadness and sort of help them reconnect as a family. And every night when they stop, Reed tries to get Sabrina out and to like engage and cook over the campfire with he and Devin and like participate in their adventure. And she just can't. He is furious about this fact, but at least he's taking advantage of trying to spend time with his daughter. They laugh together, they cook hot dogs over the fire, we sit in Daddy's lap, and that's not an appropriate thing for a 16-year-old to do, but that's neither here nor there. Who needs boundaries when you have miles and miles of the vast, untamed Alaskan wilderness? Now, before we go any further, we need to talk about how Reed talks about his wife, Sabrina, both out loud and in his internal monologue, and basically the way he treats her and the way that he views her. I have seen a lot of people reviewing this book angry at Reed for being angry at Sabrina. I understand where they're coming from, and it's not pleasant, and it's not nice. But it is part of the reality for someone who is dealing with a person that is chronically checked out. And I'm not talking about somebody who's sad from time to time or struggles to function every now and then. I'm talking about somebody who goes to bed and just stays there for days or weeks or months or years. Until you've had to deal with something like that, you can't really understand how it impacts you mentally and emotionally. And yeah, at first you are concerned, you are worried for that person's well-being, but over time that worry becomes hurt and resentment and eventually anger. And at a certain point, that's all that's left. Add on top of that you're never really sure how much of it is that they can't participate and how much of it is that they just won't. You never really know how much of it is actual chronic illness and how much is they're just not trying. And then you feel guilty for even having those thoughts or feelings in the first place, and it just all sort of snowballs and piles on top of each other. There's a lot of self-loathing involved for the fact that you're angry at somebody over something they can't help, or at least can't help in part. And it just kind of amplifies over time into this really massive mess of emotions. And until you've had to deal with something like that, you don't really understand what it's like to live that way. And every review I've seen of this book is pissed at Reed for being pissed at Sabrina, and I actually found that to be kind of relatable. I didn't particularly like the way that it was expressed, but I at least understood where it was coming from. Anyway, so back to the book. Reed is pissed at Sabrina because he feels like she's not trying, which is kind of a common theme in situations like this. And basically the only way that the two of them engage in any positive or meaningful way is at night after Devin's gone to bed. He climbs into bed with his wife and they have sex. Or rather, he has sex with her. She doesn't really participate. She just kind of lays there and takes it. And I've seen a lot of people say that Reed is a rapist and that he's constantly raping his wife, and she said no, and he did it anyway. And that is not the way that I read it. I am not a Reed apologist, by the way. I think he's a piece of shit human being, but I also don't think that he was actively raping his wife on a regular basis. And let me show you what I mean. When I start kissing her down her throat on a mission to her pussy, she shakes her head in the dark and says one simple word. No. I groan in frustration and begin our usual routine. Parting her thighs, I settle on top of her. Now that could be interpreted as her saying no to the sex and him doing it anyway, but that's not how I read it. A few paragraphs later, it says this. It's as though she punishes herself from all forms of pleasure and happiness. If Drew couldn't have it, then why should she? It tells me that she thinks this way. It says again in chapter 7 when he's talking about going down on Devin, and yes, I did say Devin, his daughter. It's been 7 years at least since I last did it. Once Drew died, Sabrina wouldn't let me pleasure her anymore. That in context with the him kissing his way down to her kitty cat tells me it was the oral she was saying no to, which he did honor. And again, I am not defending Reed. I think he's a terrible, horrible human being. But I'm also saying he wasn't actively, violently raping his wife with his daughter in the next room. Small favors, I guess. So Reed's boinking Sabrina in the back room, and Devin is up front. She's supposed to be asleep, but she isn't. She's listening to her parents get it on and touching herself. And Although that is disturbing in and of itself, the way that it is described may help articulate why I struggled so much with this book. I've touched myself before, and I'm not very good at it. All I know is it feels good when I touch a certain spot. I'm sorry, but a 16-year-old who has gone to public school in California would know what she was doing. She'll have been doing this for years at this point and would know exactly what spot she was touching and why it felt good. And y'all, I am trying really, really hard not to ascribe motivation to the author, but I cannot, for the life of me, understand why, on so many instances, when Devon is experiencing something for the first time, she is written with a childlike innocence that ages her down mentally and emotionally to the extreme. I just don't understand it. So Reed finishes with Sabrina before Devon finishes with herself, and he kind of comes out into the main room where Devon is sleeping, and rather than closing the door and giving this 16-year-old girl some privacy, he just kind of stands there watching her like a creep. When she finally realizes he's standing there, she stops, and he just glares at her angrily and then slowly closes the door, leaving his daughter filled with shame and regret. Later that evening, a terrible storm is raging outside, and Devon is once again relegated to behaving like a child instead of the teenager that she actually is. She goes and climbs into bed with Mommy and Daddy right in between them. They are both asleep and they don't realize she's there. So when Reed starts groping this warm, wriggling body, he thinks it's Sabrina he's putting his fingers into, and it is not. It's his daughter. He doesn't realize what's going on until she moans and he recognizes that the voice isn't right. Devon, for her part, is thoroughly enjoying herself. She knows exactly what's going on. Interesting, given that she doesn't understand how masturbation works. But that's neither here nor there. Devon is either a fully grown adult seductress or a 6-year-old girl, mentally and emotionally, depending upon which best suits the scene at the time. It's whiplash-inducing and really bizarre, but that's not what we're talking about here. So Devon is grinding up against her dad, and Reed is freaked the fuck out, rips his fingers out of her, and jumps out of the bed and rushes to the front of the camper because he needs some space and distance to figure out what just happened and why. And of course, at that moment, nature decides to intervene. The water from the storm washes the ground out from under the camper, and the camper rolls down a cliff. When Reed comes to, he finds Devon still in the back room, impaled through the side by a tree branch up against a wall, and she can't get herself down off of this branch. And Sabrina is nowhere to be found. Their dog is also missing too, but he's not really an important part of the story, so I'm probably not going to bring him up again. He does participate in the story, he is around, but he's not meaningful or impactful, so he's just kind of a weird extra side character that has no impact on the story. So yeah, they have a dog, they can't find him, not important. So Reed helps his daughter unimpale herself from this tree branch, and then the pair of them sort of pass out wrapped in each other's arms. And I've seen a lot of people criticize the fact that he didn't immediately go out and look for his wife in the dark, in the storm. Dude just had massive head trauma, and I'm not saying he shouldn't have tried. What I am saying is I'm not entirely convinced he was capable of it. There are certainly plenty of things to criticize Reed about. I'm just not sure this is one of them. Caveat to that, even if he could go look for Sabrina, I'm not entirely convinced he would. But at this point, I'm not sure that he was able to. So it seems like a little shallow criticism of his character to say he didn't even bother to go look for his wife, when I'm not convinced that the passing out was voluntary. Okay, so back to the story. By morning, they find Sabrina dangling half limbless from a tree. She died on impact and has basically been hanging there, deceased all night. Now, here's the thing about Sabrina. Sabrina only existed as a plot device to prevent the father-daughter relationship that doesn't start actually happening in earnest until they get to the wild. She is another barrier to keep these two people from engaging in their primal desires, as it were. And anyway, so once they get out into the wilderness, she is no longer necessary to exist as that barrier, and she gets offed. So Reed takes care of Sabrina's body, and Devin basically shuts down from all the trauma. And Reed decides he's not having it. He is not going to do a Sabrina 2.0 and basically shakes her out of it. With the camper trashed and holes all through it, it is not watertight anymore, and they have to sleep in a tent. It is in Alaska, it is still spring, it's bitchin' cold overnight, so they need to cuddle together for warmth. Go figure. There's only one bed, guys, and they're both in it. And Reed decides that the best way to keep them warm is if they're not wearing clothes. The problem is his daughter has the hots for him. She's all hot and bothered about the groping and fingering that happened the night her mother died. And she keeps trying to feel his groin. And Reed knows she's confused. His internal monologue says that he understands that she's confused and why she's confused. But at no point does this grown man take his daughter aside and talk to her about what happened or set reasonable boundaries. He never explains to her that he thought it was her mother. He never talks to her about the trauma she's been through, or about the fact that she's not making clear decisions and her head's not clear because of all the things that she's just been through. No, he just basically tells her, Devin, go to sleep, and says nothing else about it. Fast forward a couple weeks, their injuries have healed enough that they can start moving again and find a place to build a shelter. So they travel a little bit, they find a cave. Reed decides that this is a great place for a root cellar and that they're going to build a house sort of abutted up against this cave. And then they're hot and sweaty and dirty from traveling all day, so Devin decides that she wants to take a bath in the river. So despite the fact that Devin is clearly confused about appropriate father-daughter boundaries, and despite the fact that Reed is springing erections left and right every time Devin touches him like he is a firework and it's the 4th of July, Reed decides that the best way for them to get super clean bathing in the river is to do so naked. And of course he has to hold on to her so she doesn't float away. Great thinking, Dad. Now here's where it becomes unquestioningly obvious that despite Reed's protestations to the contrary, he is in fact a pedophile and is attracted to his daughter. Because at first he recognizes that this is not a good idea, that he's a little confused himself, that his daughter is very confused, and that them being naked and wet and like washing together is not a good idea. He decides to do it anyway because it is his duty to ensure that she bathes. And it just completely spoils something that should be clean and pure and wholesome between a parent and their child. And I know that unreliable narrators exist, but I'm really struggling to see it with this book. This book is written as a love story. It is marketed as a love story. It is reviewed repeatedly by many people as a love story. And yeah, he's using the excuse that he is duty-bound and responsible for her well-being as an excuse to be naked with her. It's easy to confuse who we are in this moment. With the sun baking down on us and the water rushing by, it's easy to pretend we're just a man and a woman in the wilderness. How, Reed? How is this confusing? She's your daughter. So Devin, of course, is using this bathing thing as an excuse to grind on her dad, and Reed is using it as an excuse to ogle his naked child, who then offers to wash him, and he says yes for some inexplicable reason. Oh yeah, file. And the whole time he's thinking about how nice it is to have a woman, his daughter, his 16-year-old child, look after his needs as a man. And it becomes very clear at that point that Reed is looking at Devin like a substitute wife for his deceased Sabrina, and that he probably has been for a long time. So once bath time is over, Reed decides that it's finally time to talk to Devon about what's going on and how the two of them need to set some boundaries. And for some reason, he decides that the best way to do that is to down a half a bottle of whiskey first. And rather than have a conversation with her about her feelings and all of the trauma that they've been through together, he decides to yell at her and say, "I'm your father, not your boyfriend," despite the fact that he is literally treating her like a substitute wife, and has been a relatively active participant in this whole thing the whole time. He basically just shouts at her and sends her to bed. Great talk, I guess. Later that night, after he finishes the rest of the whiskey, he decides that it's time to go to bed. So he strips down to his boxers and climbs into bed with his daughter for warmth, and then tries to pull her to him to snuggle up. Body heat, I guess, for survival, sure. And she starts fighting him off. She's elbowing him, she's slapping him, she's screaming at him not to touch her. And Reed decides that the best way to deal with this very upset young woman who doesn't want to be touched is to hold her down by the throat and make out with her. So the next morning, Reed is overcome with guilt, so he says, because he's not a sicko and not a motherfucking child molester, so he says. Anyway, so he decides he's not going to touch her anymore, and he's going to set some reasonable boundaries and stop encouraging her. Because I guess it didn't occur to him to do that before all of this went down. The pair of them over the next few weeks sort of slide into an easygoing, flirtatious sort of interaction. She is very clearly, definitively trying to seduce him, and he's just kind of letting her. Once again, rather than talking to her, Reed deals with this by sending her out into the woods to gather berries. And while she's away, he rubs one out, and it would probably be a little more discreet if he wasn't screaming her name when he came. So Devon's 17th birthday rolls around, and Reed surprises her with the gift of a bed for them to share. Because there's only one bed, y'all. Gag me. He tells Devon that she's grown into a beautiful woman. She's 17. Just wanted to point that out one more time. And the pair of them celebrate her birthday by getting drunk, because that's a brilliant idea. Devon insists that for her birthday she wants a real kiss from her father, and drunken Reed for some reason decides to oblige, to which Devon promptly responds by grabbing his crotch, and Reed is so disgusted by this act. He's really not. What he's really disgusted with is his reaction to it, but that's neither here nor there. He's decided that he needs to punish Devon for the fact that he's turned on by the fact that she grabbed his crotch, so he throws her over his lap and spanks her until she throws up. Hurt and confused by her father's confusing mixed signals, Devon retreats inside herself and basically becomes non-interactive, which she has had ample modeling to do because of her mother. And Reed is absolutely beside himself, believing that he is the cause of his daughter's current state. He definitely is. There's no question about that. And he tries to snuggle with her, tries to talk to her, tries to tell her funny stories, because that's how you make up for it. And when none of that works, he decides to stick his dick in her. The whole time, he's like, "Oh, tell me to stop, baby. Tell me to stop." Like it's her responsibility at 17 to tell this 40-year-old man who is her father not to molest her, not to rape her, not to participate in this sexual relationship with her. But that's cool, Reed. Sure, put the onus on the 17-year-old. So she gets upset when it hurts, and he sort of soothes her by calling her his pretty, smart, brave girl, which is an uncomfortably fatherly thing to say while he's buried to the hilt in his own daughter. He also tells her to call him Reed while they're in their home together, because apparently her calling him dad while he's fucking her really wigs him out. Go figure. Anyway, we're on chapter 7 at this point, about 30% of the way through the book, and it is all downhill from here. So the next morning, Reed does, for his part, feel marginally guilty for his behavior the night before, but not enough to stop doing it. He basically justifies his behavior by saying that they're out in the wild now and his animal instincts are taking over. The next day, they're out gathering wood and picking through some of the supplies that they're able to salvage from the camper. And they get attacked by a bear. Devin gets attacked first, and then Reed shoots at the bear, drawing its attention, and it sort of charges at him and then dies as it's lunging for him. It lands on top of him, and Devin is, after much effort, able to pull him free from under this bear. But he's got a bunch of broken ribs, so she has to drag him into the house. Rather than giving themselves some time to heal from their injuries, Reed decides to teach his daughter how to perform oral so he can keep fucking her even though they're physically incapable of having sex due to their injuries. And Devin gets the brilliant idea that they should perform oral on each other at the same time. Reed is absolutely fascinated by her innocence because apparently his 17-year-old daughter has never heard of 69. Now, you tell me how that's possible. It's not like she was homeschooled or super sheltered. The book just has her display this sort of childlike mentality or childlike innocence anytime it really wants to play up the fetish of her youth, and it makes me really, really uncomfortable. So weeks go by and they keep sort of getting settled in their cabin. And of course they keep having more and more sex. And even though Reed knows that there is risk involved, he neglects to use any condoms. Presumably they don't have any because he wasn't really expecting to have any sex. And I guess it never occurred to him to pull out until after she was already pregnant and he figures out that she's not having her period anymore and she's starting to show signs. And rather than talk to her about what's going on, he just gets mad at her for daring to become pregnant even though he's the one who impregnated her. Anyway, he's not mad she's pregnant or that they're having a baby, father and daughter. No, he's mad because it might be dangerous to her and he could lose her because it's all about Reed and what Reed wants. So he's scared she might die, and rather than talking to his child, who was hurt and confused by his angry behavior, he just has a temper tantrum like a big old man baby, leaving his abused daughter even more hurt and confused by his actions. So eventually, Devin, the 17-year-old, convinces Reed, the adult human being who has supposedly been through this before with his deceased wife, to talk about his feelings. And he tells her that he's scared and he's sorry he's treating her so poorly. He just doesn't express himself very well, probably due to lack of trying, but that's neither here nor there. And the pair of them have makeup sex in the cave. Reed tells her he is super excited that they're going to have this baby together, despite the fact that he was furious about it just moments before. "I want to have this baby with you," he chokes out. "So bad. But so help me, if you die, I'll shove my 45 into my mouth and take my life. I can't do this without you, baby. I can't fucking do this." That is a totally healthy parent-child relationship right there. Just put all that weight on your daughter's very narrow shoulders. Now that Reed and Devin have sort of worked out all the kinks of their relationship, and they are on the same side, we need some external conflict to sort of be introduced, because we are only at about 50% of the book on chapter 10, so something is bound to happen to spice things up and make it more interesting. So, who should stumble upon the happy couple but the boys from Deliverance? Basically, it's a bunch of inbred mountain men who are all related in various ways. They break into the cabin and have their way with Devin while Reed is held down and made to watch because he's still got broken ribs. It hasn't been long enough for him to heal and sort of fight them off. Plus, they're strong and wiry and outnumber him. And this whole time he's trying to get her to look at him while this is being done to her, and I don't know why. I guess he's trying to like share his strength or something, but basically she's being traumatized while staring at her father's face. Anyway, they and beat her so badly that she loses the baby, and Reed is being held down and made to watch, and somewhere in the middle of all of this, he is able to break free while a hillbilly is buried in his daughter's ass, and he shoots the guy and then shoots the one that was holding on to him, but the third guy escapes. So Reed has to like literally peel this dead guy off of his daughter and like pull him out of her butt. So grieving for the loss of her child and the violation to her body, Devon retreats inside herself and she just kind of shuts down. And Reed's response to this is, "It's so reminiscent of Sabrina, I could throw up." But he refuses to let his daughter become bedridden like her mother because, you know, he's still getting use out of her. So to cheer her up, he tells her stories of her mother's many miscarriages. And I'm guessing that it was meant to be written as a sort of like, if you don't get a hold of this, it's going to take you over and you're going to wind up like your mom. But what it really winds up being is more of Reed like explaining to his daughter that he chose her and her brother over his wife because Sabrina slipped into depression after a final miscarriage because he didn't hold her enough, as though like he's somehow the linchpin in her depressive episodes. Because in this book, everything revolves around Reed. Anyway, the stories work. Devon just sort of snaps out of it, justifying to herself that she doesn't really have a justifiable reason to be depressed because she didn't go through anything near what her mother did. Reed vows to hunt down the last Deliverance guy that assaulted his daughter-wife, and the pair of them just kind of start to move on. I will note that there is still some like lingering sadness, and you do watch Devon grieve the loss of her child, who she names Peach, a little bit. It's interesting to note that they grieve more for this unexpected and somewhat unwanted child who they've only known about for a few weeks, far more and far longer than either of them grieved for the loss of their mother and wife. Because Sabrina was just a plot device and was only there to keep Reed from acting on his impulses towards his daughter. I also want to note that this is the only time that Reed openly discusses his feelings or thoughts with Devon. Not when she was having inappropriate feelings or behaving inappropriately to him. Not when it became very obvious that he needed to set boundaries with her. Not when she was presumably grieving the loss of her mother or the disorientation of what's happened to her. No. Reed decides, or when she becomes pregnant and he's acting like an asshole. The only time and only reason that Reed has started to discuss his feelings with his daughter is because she doesn't want to have sex with him. Basically, when his daughter shuts down and no longer wants to have sex with him, he becomes Mr. fucking Emotion and starts talking about all his thoughts and feelings and trying to get her to come out of her shell because, it's all about Reed. Basically just re-traumatizes his already traumatized daughter by convincing her that whatever's happened to her isn't as bad as what happened to her mom, so she should just buck up and get over it. And she does, crawls right out of bed and submits herself to being daddy's little doll again. So to help his traumatized daughter heal, Reed decides that he needs to fuck her in all the ways that the Deliverance boys fucked her, to like wash away the memory of them. Father of the Year once more. And while all this is going on, Devon decides that her dad looks like an Adonis. Now you tell me how this 17-year-old girl who did not understand masturbation, has never heard of 69, did not understand how to perform oral sex or even like what was to be expected in those situations. How does she understand the term "he looks like an Adonis"? So 2 weeks after the Deliverance incident, Reed goes hunting, and I'm not talking about for bear. He packs some supplies, he packs some guns, and he goes out into the woods. Eventually he finds a shack, and he finds his dog, by the way, tied up outside the shack. Apparently the hillbillies had it. Anyway, he finds these two guys like on a porch, which he promptly shoots in the head without cause or explanation. Goes inside the shack, finds the third guy, who was the one that got away from the cabin, and shoots him in the head while he is screwing this little girl that's like laid on the bed in front of him. He figures out that the little girl is the guy's sister, and they were basically just taking turns with her. She says thank you for killing them, and in reciprocation, Reed threatens her life if she ever steals from them or tries to hurt them. And then he just leaves her there because he's a good man. And he basically decides that she's going to be dead in a week, and he's just fine with that. So Reed goes back to the cabin. Devon washes the blood off of him, and they start having sex again. Now, I would just like to point out that in every scene, in explicit and intricate detail, because it's not just glossed over like you watch them have sex, Devon's body is described in the youngest way possible. They talk about her small breasts. They talk about the innocence in her eyes and in her face. Her narrow limbs and her trim waist, and basically all of the things that would make her look or feel young in the scene are used as a fetishization of her age. We also discover about this time that this fetishization of his young daughter is not new. Basically, we learn how far back this has gone in a flashback from before they left for Alaska. Sabrina is, as usual, begging off from date night, so it leaves Devon and Reed alone together. And for some reason, they wind up in a hot tub, and he's like looking and checking out her body in her bikini, and getting angry and possessive at the idea that other men would be like looking at her or wanting her. They share a beer while she sits in his lap, and of course Reed gets a hard-on because he's been thinking about his daughter in inappropriate ways for a long time. The only thing that has stopped him from acting on these impulses is societal norms, which he removed as a barrier when he took his family out into the wilderness, and his wife, who he left to die in a tree. So after their little pat and rub in the hot tub, we're still in the flashback, by the way, Reed decides to take his daughter out on a date. Now, they were going to go to a movie, but she dresses up all pretty, and he decides to take her out on a real date, as though she were a fully grown woman, and he were trying to, like, impress her, or take her out on an adult date. So they go to a fancy restaurant, he orders wine and a few shots, which, of course, he lets her have because what better way to encourage boundaries and inhibitions in your child than to get them drunk. And then they go and grind on each other on the dance floor in front of a room full of people, I might add. And the pair of them get so caught up in the moment that he almost sticks his fingers in her while she's like grinding up on him. Anyway, the pair of them are talking about this date night that they had and what a good time each of them had and how they wanted each other even then. And they get so turned on talking about it that he can't help but bend her over and fuck her in the ass. So basically, the book is just leaning fully into it at this point. And I have heard people call this daddy kink. This is not daddy kink. Daddy kink is the consensual age regression play between two adults who are fully aware and understand what they're doing. They're fully informed, they're consenting to the activity, and they know that they can stop at any time when things become uncomfortable or it's necessary. This is not that. This is the fetishization of statutory rape. This is an adult man taking advantage of a trusted relationship with his daughter. And yes, Reed does talk about feeling guilty for his actions, but at no point is that guilt enough to make him stop doing the things he knows are harming his child. At no point does he suffer any consequences for any of this. This book was written and marketed as a love story. It was sold as a romance. This started years before she was an adult or in any way able to consent, he leveraged and used the trusted, loving relationship of a parent to groom her to let him do these things to her. And I don't care if she was a willing participant. Children can't consent. They don't understand the long-term consequences and ramifications of their actions. Are we all clear on that? Because we are only about 60% in. Let's get on with it. So Devon gets pregnant again, like you do. Reed decides to propose to her using her dead mother's ring, which I guess he pulled off her finger before throwing her in the river and letting her float downstream to be eaten by bears. Fast forward a few months, they are bonding over the baby kicking, and we get a weird little scene where Devon asks Reed, "Is this what it felt like when you felt me and my brother kicking in Mom's stomach?" And this is the second time that we get a little teaser that something isn't quite right about Devon's birth story. The first time was when he was talking about all of Sabrina's miscarriages and using that to sort of try to pull Devon out of her depression. He just sort of skates over Sabrina being pregnant and the twins being born in a really obvious and avoiding way. This time it's even more obvious that Reed isn't telling her the full story. I laugh, but I don't take my hands from her. I want to feel it move again. This is the most amazing thing I've ever felt. She stares at me thoughtfully. Even more amazing than when you felt Drew and I in Mom's belly? Her words, so sudden and confusing, startle me. I step away as if my hands have been burned. Running my fingers through my hair, I back away from her. That's a completely normal reaction. When Devon asks him what's wrong, he refuses to tell her because Reed is incapable of discussing his feelings or telling his daughter that she's adopted, which it's very obvious at this point that that's what this is alluding to. I saw this coming the first time it was mentioned. This only confirmed it. This is a big spoiler, I guess, but given that the whole review is a spoiler, I guess that's probably okay. Anyway, it's touted as a big reveal late in the book. It's basically the last few scenes in the book. And the fact that he doesn't tell her now, when he has the opportunity, when it's just them alone and everything is calm and they're happy, becomes infuriating later, and you'll see why. By the time spring rolls around, Devon is showing pretty heavily, and Atticus Knox comes around to check on them. Now, this is the guy that sold Reed the land originally, and he thought that he would see them in town, however far away that is, to pick up supplies, and they never showed up, so he knew that something was wrong, but then the ground was frozen and he couldn't quite get out to where they were, so he comes to check on them, and Reed alludes to the fact that Devon was attacked by these wild men, by these inbred wild men. And Atticus is absolutely horrified when he realizes that she's pregnant, and we are led to believe that he believes that the baby is the inbred wild men's. Never mind that plot point. It only lasts for about another page, and then Atticus sleeps in a tent outside the cabin, and the two of them are inside bunking like they do, because apparently they can't just wait like a single night while they have company. Atticus hears them and figures out that the baby's probably Reed's. The next day, when he's able to steal a moment alone with her, Atticus asks if the baby is her father's, to which Devon says yes, and acts like she doesn't know that what they're doing is wrong, despite the fact that she's clearly been perving on the fact that it is taboo, that it is forbidden. So the fact that she's behaving like it's just normal and he has to tell her that it's not is really bizarre. So Atticus tells Devon that babies born from being inbred can be born with problems, which absolutely terrifies her, because apparently this 17-year-old has regressed to being a 7-year-old again and has never heard of birth defects due to inbreeding. He offers to bring her a book on birth defects and what can happen with inbred children, and he also offers to intervene on her behalf, basically saying, if you want out of this situation, I will go and get the cops. No problem, just let me know. To which Devon refuses. Atticus leaves to go check on the little girl that Reed left in the shack, when he went and like killed all the Deliverance guys and then left her to fend for herself, because Atticus wants to see if she's still alive or if she needs anything, and he's going to go on a supply run and he's going to be gone a couple weeks. Devon tells Reed what Atticus told her about incest and the risks to their baby, and rather than use this opportunity to assuage his daughter's guilt and put her mind at ease, and just tell her that she's adopted, Reed just lets her be frightened. He has the tools to remove her fear and her guilt, and he just doesn't use them. Fast forward a few weeks, Atticus returns with the supplies, including a book on parent-child inbred birth defects and things like that, which absolutely terrifies Devon. Again, Reed does not explain to her that that's not a problem. He just keeps telling her everything's going to be okay, like that's supposed to fix everything. Atticus once again offers to save Devon from her situation, and Reed says if Atticus tries to take her, he's going to kill him. While the men unload the supplies, Devon reads the book that Atticus brought, scares the bejesus out of herself, and is basically a wreck. Reed and Devon spend the evening sort of reconnecting, and he's trying to like put her mind at ease. They burn the book because that's going to make it go away. And he just keeps telling her everything's going to be all right, to which Devon then regresses once more to her childlike state, and her fears are put to rest because Daddy says it's going to be fine, so it must be. The next day, the three of them go down to the river to go for a swim, and Reed just fucks his daughter right in front of this man. And Atticus says nothing, so I guess he's just made peace with the fact that they're happy or something. Anyway, he stays for a few weeks and helps Reed build an extension onto their house, and then he goes off back to the shack to check on Eve, who is the little girl that Reed left to die. After Atticus leaves, Devon asks Reed if he thinks that they would have wound up together even if they hadn't come out to the wilderness. And Reed tells her that basically the pair of them were so starved for affection from Sabrina that it was really only a matter of time, which just confirms that he had planned to do this all along. Basically, his response indicates that he thinks that the whole reason that they wound up in this situation is because he was attention starved because his wife wouldn't interact with him, and she was attention starved because her mother wouldn't interact with her. And all of the responsibility is placed on the dead wife because Reed can't possibly be made to be responsible for his own choices. Fast forward a few more chapters of banging and bonding, and Reed is sleeping while Devon is nesting. She is just about ready to pop, just about ready to give birth. And she opens one of the containers that the men had carried down from the camper because they emptied all the last of the supplies out of the camper and brought them down to the cabin. And she's digging through and she finds some old pictures of her and her twin and their mom when she was having a better day. And the pictures kind of stop around the age of 2, and she thinks that that's really weird that they have no baby pictures. And then in the bottom of the box is an envelope marked private, do not read. But because Devon is a child, she opens it and reads it anyway. And inside are pictures of her and her brother as infants with a different woman whom she's never seen, who looks like a teenager, and adoption paperwork. Now, at any point during her 17 years as this man's daughter, he could have explained to her that she was adopted and why. At any point during her upset over the fact that their baby could be sick or injured or die due to the fact that they were father and daughter, he could have explained to her that she was adopted, and he chose not to because it didn't serve his purpose, which was to claim and possess this child as his own, basically as his surrogate wife. And Devon, for her part, although she could be mad about the fact that she was allowed to be afraid that her baby would be injured or sick, that's not why she's mad. She's mad because the taboo of it is something she was getting off on, and it's not true. Now please, for the love of all that is holy and just, do not come into the comments and tell me that Reed not being her biological father in some way excuses or justifies or lessens what he did to her. I don't care that she is not his biological daughter. He raised her, he fed her, he bathed her, he clothed her. In any real or meaningful way, he is her father. The fact that his sperm was not used as part of her DNA does not change the fact that he is her dad, and does not in any way excuse what he did to her or what he is continuing to do to her. So don't even put that in the comments, because I'm not going to sit with that. I'm not going to let those stand. Just no. If you, for some bizarre reason, think that in any way redeems or excuses him, keep those opinions to yourself. Please do not put that crap in my comments. Okay, so Devon learns that she's adopted, and rather than being relieved that her fears are unfounded, that her baby is going to be okay, she is heartbroken because Reed isn't her real dad, and their entire relationship feels like a sham. She was really heart-set on him being her father when she was fucking him. So she runs out into the snow, while she's going into labor, I might add, belly first, right out into the cold. Hair flying everywhere, snot flying everywhere. She is just running and falling and getting up and running some more. And Reed chooses this time to wake up and announces his fury at not finding his daughter and the door standing wide open by roaring like an animal into the wilderness. He is furious that his woman is gone, and he chases her out into the woods. And catches up to her pretty quickly because, again, she's little and pregnant, so she's not moving real fast, plus she keeps falling down. When he finds her, he grabs her by the hair and throws her down into the snow and rapes her. Now, this is an actual rape. She is fighting him off, she is saying no, she is saying don't touch me, and he does it anyway. I know it had to be done. She needed to be claimed and stamped and owned. Mine. Fucking mine. So that's what Reed thinks about that. And Devon, for her part, is so mentally and emotionally screwed up by this man manipulating his parental bond with her, manipulating her love and desperation for affection, that she has this to say. This isn't like those bush people, because despite my screams of horror, I still want him. This is a hostile takeover. A reminder of who I belong to. So she is actively and vocally protesting, but mentally I guess she's okay with it because, like I said, her brain is broken. And y'all don't tell me that I'm infantilizing her. The book infantilizes her, and she's a minor. So Reed takes Devon to the shack where he left Eve, the little girl who was being abused by her Deliverance brothers. And she's survived somehow, miraculously, no thanks to Reed or probably even Atticus. Anyway, he somehow convinces Eve to run back and forth between her shack and the cabin, which tells you it's not really that far, to get supplies so that he can birth this baby that Devon is having. Because while he was raping her in the snow, she was in labor. Anyway, so the baby comes out healthy, and y'all, I cannot describe the relief I felt when I read that it was a boy. The entire time she was pregnant, all I could think was, what is going to happen if this is a girl? Reed clearly has no problem crossing those boundaries, and Devon is so messed up in the head, she's not going to save them. And I am more than a little disgusted with both the book and myself that the fact that this was a baby boy felt hopeful, felt like a silver lining, felt like a thing to celebrate or be happy about. Because then at least his grandpa daddy wouldn't want to f*** him. Anyway, we get another flashback that tells us that Devon and her twin brother were born of incest to a 14-year-old. And that Sabrina and Reed adopted them when they were 2. He's never going to tell Devon, has no plans of telling Devon that she was born of incest, and that could potentially have something to do with why she is the way that she is, that she was exposed to this for the first 2 years of her life. Anyway, so he just decides to keep that little tasty tidbit to himself. And then we get, of course, the typical romance novel epilogue that fast forwards 2 years. Atticus is back and helping, I guess he and Reed are buddy-buddy now, and he's just fine with their relationship. Because he's helping Reed build a bigger cabin, because they're going to need the space. Reed and Devon have 2 little boys now and another on the way, who she's hoping is a girl, because I guess she just wants to make sure that Reed is never lonely. And I would love to tell you guys that that is the end, but it isn't, because we need to talk about the author's note. Now, this has been removed in more recent versions of this book. If you buy it now, this won't be in it. But when it was originally published, this was in the back on the last page. Dear reader, thank you so much for going on this wild adventure with me. I know sometimes my stories are way outside the box, but I can't thank you enough for always seeing it to the end. Please, as you review, keep your spoilers to a minimum. I'm afraid that some folks might miss out on an unconventional but beautiful love story if they knew what sort of taboo element they were looking at before diving in. Once you're in, though, it sort of hooks you, which is what I hope to do for future readers. I appreciate you keeping that tidbit to yourself. Thank you so much. So the author is literally asking other readers to not reveal the nature, the extreme nature of the taboo and dark and troubling content in this book, which is troubling enough in and of itself. But here's where I'm really struggling. Like I said at the beginning, this is a work of fiction. These characters are not real. The things that they do and say and participate in are not real. But there has got to be a better way to handle this subject matter. Between the fetishization of Devon's youth and the intentional mental and emotional aging down of her, specifically in sex scenes, to the attempt at justification of their relationship and what Reed is doing to his daughter, by the whole adoption thing and her not being actually biologically related to him, I am really, really struggling not to ascribe motive to the author. And I know you can't. I know you can't. But I'm having a really hard time. There is no way any of us can know what K. Webster was thinking or feeling when they wrote this and published it. There's no way to know if this is an accurate portrayal or representation of what they were trying to communicate, or if maybe things fell down a little bit and it didn't come off quite as cleanly as they expected. The only person that knows is the author, and it's not fair to guess or presume what they think and feel about their own work. But I have to admit, I am really struggling with that. This feels like pedo porn to me. It feels like the glorification of incest and parental rape. It feels like the taboo and titillating parts were intentionally romanticized for marketing. And that all of that was done without care or concern to the impact that it would have on the readers, or what that might mean for the people who read the book. Now, I'm not saying that authors are responsible for the emotional state of readers when they read their book. I'm not even saying that I think it should be required for people to have content warnings. I'm not sold on that idea. I think content warnings are great, but I don't think that they should be required. But I really have a hard time with the author coming and intentionally trying to mislead their audience. I really, really struggle with that. I'm having a really hard time with the author out of the pages of the book calling this a love story and the glorification of pedophilic relationships. It's not a love story. It's not romance. And I think that it's irresponsible to not call it what it is. And I'm really, really struggling with that. The thing is, I read difficult and gory and taboo books all the time, but this one is particularly difficult to process for me. I need more time to sort of think over why I'm struggling so much with this one. I have a feeling it has to do with the way that this topic was discussed, and it could be just the lack of any meaningful consequences or the romanticization of it all. Romanticization? Romanticization of it all. And I'm really struggling to find the right words, and the only one that keeps ringing through my head is that it's irresponsible. Let me know what you think, because I am clearly still trying to wrap my head around it and get my thoughts together. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one.